Hello, and I'm going to talk about I think today I would like to focus on some more essentials. Um, so what we're going to do is we're going to do some editing for this picture that I took of my record player. This is actually one of the pictures I was working on for the cover of my book, but I thought we could at least take a look at it and kind of play with it a little bit and see if it's worthwhile of being the cover of my book. Um, so here I have just opened the image in Photoshop. I haven't done anything. And to repeat how I did that, I'm going to close this out and I'm going to go to my Finder, the happy face. I'm going to take my picture, I'm going to drag it to Photoshop, and there it is. Opens up in Photoshop. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a brand new Photoshop document of it. So Format, Photoshop, and I'm going to save it wherever I want to save it, call it whatever I want to call it. So I'm going to call it record player picture and get rid of the extension. That way it's a Photoshop file. It saves all of the layers over here. It'll save all my adjustments and everything else. And save. Now I have a Photoshop document called record player picture, and that'll change up here in the tab, which is good to note. On the right here, we'll see under my layers, though, that the background is still locked. So I'm going to double click, and I'm going to change the name to main picture. That way, when I press OK, you'll notice that the layer name changes to main picture. You can always change the name over here later by double clicking and go into main picture. So I thought about this. I was thinking about it. I didn't know specifically what I wanted to do with this, but I thought it was a really cool picture. There was a lot of really cool, interesting blur. I think the focal point is about here, where everything gets into focus, and you can see the label over here very slightly. So let's first do a few things that I know I need to do before I do anything. So the first thing I want to do is I want to get rid of that label because copyright is a pain in the butt. So I'm going to zoom in by doing a Control plus, Control plus, Control plus, Control plus. Now here you can see that we're really close to the picture. I'm going to grab over here my clone tool, clone stamp, and click on it. My size is actually pretty good at the moment. I am going to hold down the Control key, the Option/Alt key on my keyboard and click once with my left main click to be able to select a starting point. I'm going to move my mouse down, and now you'll see that I get a little preview of what it would look like if I clicked down and brushed. So remember that the clone stamp tool, you first select a place that you want to clone from, and then you want to find a place that you want to clone that spot to. So you first click Alt or Option, click, and then go down, and then brush like you were normally brushing with a brush. So I'm going to brush a little bit. Now that's a little bit too much opacity for me, so I'm going to undo that with a Command Z. Go up to opacity and go down a little bit. Here, I'm going to go back and do the same thing. Alt. I might actually pull from here this time because it's a little closer. And then because the opacity is so small, it's going to help me get rid of it. Not all the way in the first pass, but I'm just clicking, 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 and you should be able to see my clicks to know how many times I'm clicking. I'm doing this just to get a good basis on the picture, just so I don't have a huge, coverage. I want to make sure I get rid of this label as much as possible. So I'm just clicking and I'm just repicking a spot to go from. So I'm repicking here, I'm going to go down here, and I'm going to click some more. You can either click or you can brush. I like to click because I'm very obsessive about where it looks. There I brushed and it went a little quicker. Now that I have more of it green, I'm able to more clearly find a better, a cleaner and larger area to pull from. I was clicking a lot before because there wasn't a whole lot to pull from. Now that I have a huge area I can pull from, it's easier for me to brush more often and get a better result. Click on the right, click on the right to sample, getting rid of some of the sampling. And this is also a good moment to be able to fix some of this too. So I notice this is a little bit off. So I'm going to fix that. I want to get rid of some of these extra like notches from the L. So just real quick, when you take a digital picture, it takes a crap ton of pixel data, which is when you go even farther in, you'll notice that the farther in you go, that everything turns into a pixel, these little dots, etc. Now, here we go. You can see all the pixels. Now here you'll notice that the pixel actually, because there wasn't enough information, it got blown out. It turned into a little white spot here. So what we're going to do is I'm going to just Alt-click in the black space, and then over top of the missing data, I clicked on it to fix some of these extra missing pieces of information in the picture. So I'm going to again Option click over here and keep working on my, my bad, Option click and keep working on my wonderful, too dark, undo. Now I'm basically just going through and just making sure that I have a very good basis over all of this. That way, down the road, if there's ever an issue with copyright, I don't have this logo in here screwing everything up. So I'm just taking little pieces to sample. It's kind of like when you paint, when you mix in various colors. I'm using a low opacity to get a good mixture of each of these colors in the rest of the front of the record. I forget what it's called, the front of this, the needle, etc. So I think we're getting pretty close. I'm getting a really good mixture of all the greens. And if I zoom out, Control minus, Control minus, Control minus, Control minus, you'll see I still have that little curve. I'm going to try and get rid of some more of that curve. Undo. Might go down opacity even more, but bring up my size a little bit by doing Command and then right bracket, or going up here and going up a little bit, 31, that's good. Now I'm going to use that to give me a little more of a blend between this brighter green and the dark green. Now I have something that I'm a little more proud of and it looks a little bit better. I'm going to zoom out a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more, and now I don't have a label right there. Now I'm looking, and it looks like this top part on the left is a little darker than the rest. So I'm going to zoom in a little more, and I'm going to fix that by going in, pressing Alt down here, and because my opacity is so low, I can brush and get a nice little increase on the highlight over here. You just want to make sure that it fills in naturally. If it doesn't fill in naturally, it doesn't look good. You want to try and match as much of that highlight and that color as you can. Notice there's a highlight here. There's also a little bit of a green highlight here. I want to make sure that matches. So now that when I zoom out, it looks much, 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 much better. All right. So first things first. Label gone. Now let's play around with a few of these filters and everything. So I'm going to do some base filtering on this. So let's do some brightness and contrast. This is going to affect everything, and I want it to affect everything. So I'm going to bring the brightness up a tad and the contrast up a lot. More on the brightness and more on the contrast. Something about a brightly contrasted picture makes me really happy inside. All right. Yeah, I see a lot of the finer details pop out, all that kind of stuff. So that's one. Now I'm going to go over to color balance. I want to see if I can fix that hue problem I have. There's a lot of this redditing going on, like it's like red, yellow a little bit. I'm going to see if I can change the color balance a little bit to just slightly tweak it to make sure that I get rid of some of the red. Now, how I work this is if I have red here, or like a hue that's red that I don't like, I will go to the opposite side on the color balance chart. And the color balance chart is the little scale, the justice scale here. So here, red, I have too much red, so I'm going to go a little bit over to cyan. And it's a little yellow, so I'm going to go a little over to blue. And now you'll see that the light looks more natural, and it looks like everything's a little clearer down there. I might even go a little bit more into the green spectrum to give it a more natural light. Perfect. Now let's go into some other stuff. Hue and saturation. What if I just took out all the saturation altogether? Yeah, it looks okay. It looks kind of cool. But I don't want to do that. I do, though, want to get rid of some of the saturation. To get rid of a lot of that popping colorness. Like, I don't need the popping of this stuff over here as much. So everything itself gives a little bit more of a natural feel. The lightness, if I bring that up or down, doesn't do anything for me. I'm going to leave it at 0. And I'm just going to type in 0 because getting to 0 is too hard. All right, so now we have 3 adjustments so far. I'm going to head over to my curves, and I'm going to see if I can change some of these curves. Here, you'll notice it's very dark, and that's perfectly fine because that's exactly how things go. Now, I want to see if I can use the curve chart. See how cool that is? That's obviously not something I want, but I can use the curve chart to see if I can kind of bend this into a little bit different of a picture. And now let's unpreview it with and without. With and without. So it kind of did a little bit more of the contrast for me, which is fine. But I have a little more control over it because I can tell the leveler to have the whites be a little more blown out and the darks here be a little bit darker. That looks good to me. Now I've done all of that. I'm going to leave it how it is. I'm also going to, I want this to be a 100%. This is how things are going to go. So I am actually going to do something we've never done before. I'm going to select everything here. I'm going to right click, or for you left click, and I am going to merge the layers. What that does is that gets rid of all of the adjustments and puts them flatly into one layer called curves. Now, I don't have any adjustment power over everything anymore. Everything is all flattened out into this one single layer, which is fine. Perfect by me. Now, let's do some tinkering here. First thing, I want to come over to the left here and get some cropping in. I don't like this bright highlight over here, and it feels like it's too much. So I'm going to move it in a little bit. And remember too, since I'm working on a book cover, I want to try and get the picture to be kind of vertical. But you also want to make sure that when you crop something, people understand what the heck it is when it's done at the end of the day. So I'm going to leave a little bit more of that in there. That looks good. I'm going to accept it at the top. And now here I have my cropped picture. I'm going to zoom in over here, and so I'm going to make some changes to this area here. I don't like how those wires are there. It's a little distracting for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here to my quick select. And I'm going to quickly select this whole area over here. Now what I'm going to do too is, actually that's perfectly fine. I'm also going to add to the selection this stuff over here. So I now have selected just the wires and a lot of the black over here. Oh, too much. Edit, undo quick selection. Good. Here I'm going to go to my saturation at the top on the right, and I'm going to kill the saturation. Now what that does is that kills the saturation, but it kills it only in the area over here, in the filtered, sorry, the layer mask area. So we selected an area, we added an adjustment, and now you can see that it's much less distracting than it was before. We did miss an area though, so I'm going to click on the layer mask, get my brush tool, get white, and then I'm going to draw over that area. I'm going to make my brush a lot bigger. That way you can see it here. Here we are. I'm going to brush over here with white, and you can see that that now affects everything in there as well. Perfect. So the wires are still there, but they're not as distracting as they were before. You'll notice, though, that I messed up here, too. You can see there's a little bit right above the wires that was modified that I don't want to be modified. So I'm going to change my color to black on the brush. I'm going to brush over it, and hopefully that will make a little bit of a change. And yes, it did. Perfect. Now I have my needle that's much clearer than it was before. I got rid of the front logo, and over here I got rid of the wire color because that was too distracting. Perfect. Now what should we do next? I want to get rid of some of the colors in this picture. So let's do some more selection. So I'm going to use quick select. I'm going to bring up my size a lot because it's so small. I'm going to grab the front of this, where all this, too much. I want to grab the front where all the yellow is. Not the needle though. I want to just grab the front. Now that's grabbing too much. So I'm going to do a minus. I'm going to just quickly try and unselect some of the stuff that I don't need. I don't want the green and I don't want the red, but I do want all of the other stuff. Alright, so now I just got the bottom of the picture. I'm going to now adjust the bottom with a hue and saturation. And I'm going to bring the saturation down even more. And now that, you can see, is just affecting the bottom part of the picture. Not going to get rid of all of it, because if I made it black and white, it would look pretty weird. But now it pushes your eye towards this middle part over here. And you can see that it's not as present as it was before. Now, I don't really like these green things anymore over here. So I'm going to go back to my curves. I'm going to go back to the clone stamp tool. I'm going to zoom in with Command plus, Command plus, Command plus, Command plus. And I'm going to get rid of these because this is, to me, this is too distracting. Bring my opacity up pretty 100%. And over here, I'm going to click and alt click, and I'm going to brush away this stuff. I don't want any of it in my picture. It's too distracting. I don't mind leaving a little bit of it because you can see, I don't know if you keep moving around the picture, you can see there's a little bit of a hue around it. I don't want to totally get rid of it. Just to make sure that there is a little bit of a glossy finish to it as well. So now, if I zoom out, I get a much clearer sense of where I'm at. This is fine with me. This looks like the middle, a flare up on the needle, the knob in the middle of the record player, and it sparked a beautiful little light lens flare over this way. There is an option though over here under render, under filter, to do a lens flare. So let's try that and see if that works. Here, I'm going to move the lens flare to the specific spot that it got flared, and see if the lens flare makes a big difference. And now you can pick what lens type, and that 105 prime or movie. Let's try the movie prime. That looks pretty funky, doesn't it? It kind of looks like a Star Trek movie or anything like this. I'm going to bring the brightness down a little bit, but I'm going to go back to the 105 prime because that looked much more like what I was looking for. Now, why I'm doing this is it gives me a sense of the idea that I don't want the back to be that kind of flat, and I wanted to give it a little more spark to it. If I bring the brightness even farther up, that might also work as well. Yeah, I like that. I'm going to go with that. Brightness about 106 with my 105 millimeter prime. Press OK, and bam, I have a lens flare that pops off over there. I don't like it, so we're going to go back, Command Z. I am going to work on that a little bit more though. Render, lens flare, right back where I was. I'm going to do it, but I'm going to bring the brightness down about half, about 71. Now, that is much more what I'm talking about. You get the little lens flare effect, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, perfect. What I'm going to do to fix it, though, is I'm going to do some opacity filtering. So I'm going to bring my size of my clone tool really far up, even farther than that, about 150. I'm going to Alt, and then I'm going to edit some of this stuff, the lens flare, just so it's not as you know, as clear and obsessively clear as it is now. This tends to be a little clear without a filter on top of it. So I'm going to do the same over here to give it a little more realism. And now those aren't as completely obvious that they are computer generated than they were before. This looks pretty real to me over here, and it looks pretty sweet. Cool. Now, what else can we do? I think that we should try to make the hue and saturation for the whole thing maybe a little bit smaller. Just about minus 21. Cool. All right. So now we have our picture. The whole thing is good. I'm going to play with some filters to see what we can do. I'm going to go to File Save, though, just to make sure everything is saved. Maximize capability, all that good stuff. Filter, I'm going to do some distort. Let's do filter gallery instead so we can get some ideas of where things are, how things look. I'm going to bring my percentage down to about 25 so we can get a better, clear idea. Artistic, film grain. It's okay, not so good. Intensity, maybe too much. Give it a little bit of a grain. Yeah, maybe a little bit of a grain. That way it's a little bit rough around the edges. That looks good. So if I press OK, what happens? Everything gets a little brighter, but the actual graininess of everything looks really cool too. So I have this cool effect on the entire thing. So let's go back to my filter gallery and see if there's any other filters we can add to it to, you know, give it a little bit of a, oh, I redid what I did. So if you go to filter and go to filter gallery at the top, it just does the last filter that you did again. So we want to undo filter gallery, and you can see that we have only one film grain now. So filter gallery again, here we are in film grain. I unfortunately have to go back to let's do 50% this time to give it a little bit bigger. Here I have that. I'm going to look around and see if there's anything that I want to do to give it a little bit of a more a certain effect. So accented edges under brush strokes actually looks pretty cool. I'm going to do the edge brightness a little less. And the smoothness down a little bit. A lot of times when you do some of these effects too much, they look really fake. But if you do them very slightly, Like here, oh, that looks really cool. I'm going to press OK. And now I have this really cool kind of like artistic effect. Not only does this help with the brightness and the background, but it also gives it all of those. A lot of the picture felt like it wasn't in focus, but now it gives a lot of this stark striking lines, and the contrast and the sharpness looks really cool. I'm a fan of that. I think that looks really cool. So what else can we do? I'm going to leave it at that. So I have a logo actually for the book that I already created as well. Go to my Finder. Here in my Dropbox, I have under my here I have my caution headphones that I've created. I believe this one's it. Yeah, that's it. I'm going to take this. I'm going to drag it in. And when I drag it in, it pops up as a separate layer that I can use. But remember on the right, this is all weird and funky because it is below any of these filters. So I'm going to drag it to the top. I can't. Whoops, my bad. So you got to place it first before you can do any edits with it. So I'm going to place it and commit where it is. I've committed it, committed the size. Perfect. Now I'm going to drag it to the top. Perfect. Now here, I have to decide where I want to put it. Do I want to put it in the middle? I want to put it in the bottom? I'm not really that sure anymore. Cool. So I really like where things are pointing. I'm going to edit, transform this, or Command T. I'm going to take this, I'm going to resize it with the Shift button down. And I am going to just leave this over here as a little logo on the bottom right. And see how that looks. It looks pretty good. Cool. So realistically, a book cover is probably a little taller than this. So let's talk about that. Let's do at the top, if you go to image and then you go to canvas size, the canvas is actually the, think of it as the actual piece of canvas. Like if you buy a piece of artwork, the canvas is where the picture is painted. If you have an actual image though, the image can be like 4x3, but the canvas is too big, meaning you have empty white space on the canvas. So here, I'm going to increase the size of the canvas. I'm going to anchor it down at the bottom, meaning it anchors here at the bottom, and increase the height to about 60. So I'm adding 7 inches to the top. And in fact, let's make it 65. Now I press OK. Because I have it anchored at the bottom, it's going to only increase the canvas size at the top because the picture is going to be anchored or stuck at the bottom. Press OK. Cool. Now I have this extra spot at the top. I'm going to take my Always Wear headphones. I'm going to bring it to the top and see if that works a little bit better. I'm going to center this in the middle because obviously I think everything should be centered in the middle of everything. Perfect. Now at the top, you'll notice we have all this little grid at the top. That means it's a blank and a transparent image. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new layer, layer 1. I'm going to have it be right below Always Wear Headphones sign print. I'm going to add a rectangle on the left here, shape with a blank fill. I'm going to add it to the top here, and because that is already black at the top of my picture because we've been working with it so much, you'll notice that I have a Always Wear Headphones sign there at the top with a black border around it, which completes my picture. This is a good test. We might try this again. I don't think I'm going to use this as a cover of my book, but we can work on that as well another day, another time. Thank you for listening. Have a good day.